A little over 1 year ago, I had an idea. It was a podcast about energy and emotional healing, about women reclaiming their lives and reconnecting with their own inner divine. And I started, even though I wasn't sure that it would work. I had no audience. But 52 episodes later, I'm standing here amazed that I actually did it. And not because the podcast blew up or because I have thousands of listeners, because I showed up again and again, even when I was tired, even when I didn't feel inspired, even when my job was draining every ounce of energy that I had. And in doing that, I learned some things that not just changed the podcast, but changed my entire understanding of how growth actually works. So today I wanted to share 7 lessons with you that I learned over the last year, not necessarily as a celebration of success, but as a reflection of what matters, of what creates real change, and of what's possible when you keep showing up, even when everything in you wants to quit. Because these lessons, they weren't just lessons that I learned. They're lessons for you too. And whether you've been here with me since day one or it's your first time here, you probably know what it's like to want something or to commit to something. And then to face that moment where you have to choose to either keep going or to give up. So that's what today's episode is for that moment. Welcome to Jotindi, Journey to the Inner Divine, a sacred space for healing energy, emotional release, and soulful transformation. If you're ready to live with joy, ease, and purpose, you're in the right place. So, one of the biggest things that I've wrestled with this year is the idea of forcing yourself. Spiritual spaces always talk about forcing versus flowing, right? Being in alignment, that you're not supposed to force action or productivity, and you're not supposed to force growth. The teaching kind of goes, if it's not flowing, it's not aligned. But what I learned over the last year is that that is actually incomplete because there's a critical difference between forcing yourself to do something and to challenging yourself to stay in alignment. Okay. Forcing is when you're doing something that goes against your core values or against your intuition, like saying yes when you mean no. You're showing up to something that doesn't actually matter to you. You're moving toward a goal that your soul doesn't really want. And that creates resistance and resentment because you're actually betraying yourself. Whereas challenging yourself to stay in alignment is different. This is when you're tired or you don't feel motivated or you just feel like I'd rather not today. But you know that the commitment matters and you know that it's part of your path and that you show up anyway, not because you're forcing yourself to be someone that you're not, but because you're honoring a commitment that you've made to yourself. And there's a big difference in that. And what that looked like for me over the last year is that I've been diagnosed with this autoimmune disease, which I've mentioned before. And there were weeks when I did not feel inspired to make an episode, or when my job had completely drained me, and when I desperately wanted to skip a week or push it out to next month, or just give myself permission to take a break. And I could have called pushing through forcing. I could have said, this isn't flowing, so I shouldn't do it. But the truth is that I made a commitment to myself and to this vision and to you. And in honoring that commitment, even when I didn't feel like it, that was the most aligned action that I could take. Because the truth is, alignment isn't always about following inspiration and following the good feelings, right? It's about doing what you said you were going to do, even when your inspiration fades. So when you show up for yourself and for your commitments, especially when you don't feel like it, you're sending a message to the universe and to yourself that you can be trusted, that you can trust yourself to follow through, and that your words mean something. And that builds the entire foundation for everything else. because you can't really manifest what you want if you don't trust yourself to follow through or to do what you said you're going to do. And there's also something deeper to this that I want you to understand. I wasn't forcing myself to show up for this podcast. I was showing up for my future self in spite of everything that was trying to hold me back. I was acting in a way that the person that I'm becoming can look back on and be proud of. Because if I had let my other commitments drain me to the point where I abandoned this, I would not have been in flow. I wouldn't have been honoring myself. I would have been shrinking. I would have been letting what society told me that I should do, like get a regular job and rest when you're exhausted and follow the comfortable path. I would have let all of that kill my dreams. I would have been cutting the world off from these incredible gifts that I've been sharing with you guys. And I don't want that version of my life. I don't want to align myself with the rat race. I don't want to align myself with exhaustion and compromise and believing that that's just how it is. I want to align myself with healing, with love, with leading other people to heal, with the divine oneness that is our universe. I want to align with the energy of joy and love and growth and expansion. And sometimes you have to do that work even when you're tired or when you're in pain or when every external circumstance is telling you to stop. That's when it matters the most because that's when you're choosing your soul's path over your ego's comfort. So show up when you're tired and when you're exhausted or uninspired, and not by forcing yourself through something you don't want to do, but by honoring your commitment and your alignment to the things that you actually want to create. Because the truth is, alignment isn't measured by how easy something feels. It's about knowing your path and choosing that path over and over again, even when you don't feel like it. That's how you build an aligned life. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is compounding. And this is where the beginning of your journey is invisible, right? When I started the podcast, I had no audience. Episode 1 got maybe 25 downloads, and I'm not even sure if all of those were real people. Some of them might have just been my mom refreshing the page. And for weeks, right, I was creating into what felt like a void. I kept putting episodes out, and it felt like I was offering my words and my energy and my tension into emptiness. And it would have been so easy for me to look at those numbers and think, well, this isn't working. What's the point? But something deep in me knew better. Something deeper said, keep going. You're building something that you can't see yet. So I kept showing up. And what I learned is the alchemy of compound interest. Okay, in finances, compound interest is a really simple mathematical principle. Well, some people don't think it's very simple, but basically, you invest $100, right? You earn $5 in interest. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, right? But then you earn interest on that $105 and then on 110. And then exponentially, without adding any more money, you start earning and earning until you're making thousands of dollars. And it kind of seems like magic math, like that's impossible. But the thing is, that same principle applies to energy work and to your intention and to your spiritual practice. Each episode that I created was not just a podcast. I was making a deposit into an unseen bank of energy and intention into the quantum field. And that frequency that I was creating, I released it into the universe to create ripples. And every single episode was created with the intention of serving people, of healing, of connecting women to their inner divine. And that intention didn't just disappear into the void, it compounded. And this might sound mystical, but there's a little bit of quantum science in here too. On a spiritual level, energy doesn't dissipate, it transforms, right? It builds, it creates a field of resonance. And on a quantum level, every intention that you have, every thought, every intentional action, it creates a wave in the quantum field. It ripples out, and that interferes with our reality in ways that we can't really measure yet, but you can feel it. So while it looked like nothing was happening, while my download numbers stayed small, While my audience was seemingly invisible, something was happening. My frequency was building. My intention was compounding, and the quantum field was organizing itself around my consistent, aligned action. And when you do that, at some point, there's a threshold, and you don't see it coming. You just show up, do the work, believe in the invisible, and then suddenly everything shifts. People start finding the podcast. Episodes that were sitting at 10 downloads now suddenly get 50. And that work that was invisible starts to become visible. That's a quantum shift. From the outside, it looks like an overnight success, like it came out of nowhere, but it didn't. And I want to relate this to something that might make more sense. I call it the Hollywood principle. When I moved to Hollywood and I started working in the film industry, I kept hearing this thing over and over that this is a 10-year town. And I didn't really understand what that meant in the beginning, but what it meant was that everybody who looks like an overnight success has actually been grinding for about 10 years before you ever hear their name. And it was crazy. I saw it happen over and over again. And now I have friends who are actors and directors, and you might know who they are, but they're all working their asses off in obscurity for nearly a decade before they had a breakthrough. And here's what really blew my mind. It was consistent. Right around that 10-year mark, something would shift. They would suddenly land that big role, or whatever work they were putting in that seemed invisible suddenly became visible. And I realized they're not working any harder at year 9 than they were at year 1. What was different was the compounding. All of those years of small roles and auditions and day jobs and networking, it was all building. They were building their frequency, and they were building their skill and building connections and building the energetic foundation for what was next. And then when they reached that threshold, when they had compounded enough, then the universe responded. So every overnight success is a decade in the making. And that matters because if you are doing spiritual work right now, if you're doing healing work, intentional work, and it feels like nothing is happening, like you are speaking into the void, like you keep putting in all this effort with no returns, I want you to know this. First of all, you're not wrong to feel that way. It does feel invisible and things do get difficult and it is easy to give up. But I need you to understand that that invisibility is the fertile ground. That's where your real work is happening. When nobody's watching, when there's no external validation, but you keep showing up purely because you know that it matters, that's when you're doing the deepest work. And you're not wasting your time, you're compounding. You are building something in the quantum field that's about to break through into the physical reality. And here's what quantum physics reveals. Before anything manifests in this physical world, it exists as a potential in the quantum field. And this is not like a religious concept some people think it is. This is observable and measurable. Every intention that you hold, every action that you take with alignment, it's creating a disturbance in that quantum field. And you can't really see it and you can't really measure it on a spreadsheet, but it's there. It's building and organizing and preparing to shift into physical reality. This is why meditation works, why consistent, intentional action creates results that seem impossible for people. You're not just doing something in the physical world, you're creating waves in the quantum field. And those waves are aligning your entire reality around your intention. And I do know this from my own experience, from watching my friends in Hollywood, from all the things that I've studied myself. That threshold is real and you will reach it. And maybe it won't take you 10 years. Maybe it's 5 or 2. But if you keep compounding, if you keep showing up and you keep intending and taking aligned action, there is a moment when that invisible work is going to become visible. And when it does, you'll look back and see that it wasn't luck and it wasn't magic. It was the inevitable result of everything that you have been working towards. So you have to trust that process, even when you can't see it, because the entire quantum field is working for you right now. Your ancestors are supporting you. Your guides are conspiring on your behalf. The universe is organizing every detail to support your vision. You just can't see it yet. But one day you will, and that will be beautiful. And that leads us into the third lesson. And it's why most people quit right before their breakthrough. And I call that the danger zone because it's a dangerous place to be, And there's a moment, and it usually comes somewhere between the compounding and the breakthrough. And it's where everything gets harder. And unfortunately, it's not easier or better, but it's harder. And that moment is the moment where most people quit. So, number 3, don't quit when you're in the danger zone. I know you're exhausted, and I don't mean just regular tired. I mean deeply bone tired, the kind of tired where sleep doesn't even fix it because exhaustion is coming from somewhere deeper than in your body. You've been doing the work, but it feels like you're pushing a boulder up a hill, and that every step requires more effort than the last one. And your work is still invisible, but now you're starting to question if anything's actually happening. You're wondering if you've been fooling yourself this whole time. I mean, 9 years of putting effort into something, are you ever going to see the results? Is it ever going to actually happen for you? That doubt starts creeping in, and not gently. It floods. What if this doesn't work? What if I've been doing all of this for nothing? You're still showing up, but you're running on fumes. And that juice that kept you going before, that excitement, the inspiration, that sense of purpose, that all feels very quiet now. And then one day it comes. Maybe I should just stop. Maybe it's time to throw in the towel. Maybe I'm not really meant for this anyway. Now, what's going on a deeper level is that your nervous system is tired. And if you've been in a state of pushing and striving and reaching for something beyond your current circumstances for a long time, your nervous system has been activated for a long time. You've been operating in this low level state of stress, and at some point, that activation gets exhausting. Your system needs rest, it needs integration time, and it needs to process everything that's happened. But of course, you're still pushing because you know you're close. You can feel that threshold approaching because you've come this far to not just come this far. You don't want to stop now. So instead, you push harder and your system gets even more tired. Your mind starts playing this game, telling you things like, if this was working, wouldn't I see something by now? Wouldn't something have changed? And this is your system trying to protect you. It's saying things like, hey, we've been pushing for a really long time. Maybe we should conserve energy. Maybe we should stop trying so hard. And it's not trying to sabotage you, and it's not laziness. It's just your body doing its job. But your body doesn't understand that you're almost at that threshold. It doesn't know that the breakthrough is just 3 weeks away. It knows that you're tired, and the intelligent thing to do is rest. So it's telling you to give up, to stop pushing. It's not worth it. And for most people, that's when they listen. That's when they throw in the towel and let it go. But I want you to know that if you quit while you're in the danger zone, you'll never know how close you actually were. And you're going to carry that what if for the rest of your life. And that is a very heavy thing to carry. But more than that, you will have reinforced a pattern in your nervous system. You're teaching yourself that you give up when things get hard. And that pattern is going to show up in other areas of your life. That relationship that could have been amazing, you quit when it got hard instead of working through it. Or that healing that you desperately needed, you quit when things got difficult and you got exhausted. And each time you quit, it gets easier the next time. But the thing is if you push through that danger zone, if you survive this moment of maximum doubt and exhaustion, something shifts. You prove to yourself that you can do hard things, that you don't quit when it gets uncomfortable, and that you're capable of honoring a commitment even when every part of you wants to stop. And suddenly, you're someone who follows through, someone who perseveres, someone who can trust themselves. Now, I do want to say this. Sometimes in the danger zone, your system actually is telling you it's time to stop. And sometimes you should quit. But the question is, how do you know the difference of when to quit versus when to push through? Now, if you're in the danger zone, I really think that you should push through if you are tired, but your work still feels aligned. If the doubt that you're having is coming from fear and not from your intuition, or if your soul is still calling you towards this, your soul is still saying yes, but your body is tired because you're pushing because you made a commitment, not because you're chasing somebody else's dream. And the thing that you're doing is in service of your actual values and your purpose. There are some signs that maybe you need to stop. And that is if your work is hurting you. And I don't just mean like challenging you, but actually harming you. Or your intuition is saying to you that this isn't yours, not just that this is hard. Or if you're doing it for external validation rather than your own internal alignment. If your nervous system is saying no and it's just been saying no for a very long time, and the work is taking from you instead of adding to you. And I know this difference is subtle, but your body knows. So, how do you get through this when you want to keep pushing, but your body is telling you to stop? Well, first, give yourself some grace about what your personal best is. Because your personal best when you're burned out from your job is not going to be the same thing as your personal best when you're rested and resourced and restored. And that's okay. If you're in the danger zone, your job is not necessarily to perform at your peak. Your job is to show up at whatever level you actually have energy for. Maybe that's only 50% instead of 100%. Maybe that's one episode a month instead of one a week. Or maybe that's just moving into a maintenance phase instead of a growth phase. And it's not failure, it's wisdom. Because your nervous system does need you to meet it where it actually is, not where you think it should be. The second thing is get some support. This is where community becomes a non negotiable because you can't survive the danger zone by yourself. You need to find somebody who believes in what you're building, someone who can remind you of the vision that you lost sight of, and someone who can hold that faith for you when yours starts to run out. And that could be a therapist or a coach or a mentor, but you need a witness. You need someone who says, I know you're exhausted and I know you want to quit. And I also know that you're about to break through and you need to keep going. The third thing is to adjust, not abandon. So you don't have to quit completely, but you might need to adjust. Maybe you need to take a week off, or maybe you need to lower your expectations for the next month, or maybe you need to ask for help so that you're not carrying everything alone. But quitting is different from adjusting. Quitting is completely saying, I'm done. Adjusting is saying, I'm still in. I just need to do things a little bit differently for a while. And the fourth thing is you need to remember why you started. Remember that fire that made you commit in the first place. Remember what you felt when you first envisioned this thing that you're building. That feeling is still true. That vision is still real. And you're just tired. But tired doesn't mean wrong. Tired just means you need rest and support, not that you need to abandon the whole thing. So here's what I want you to know. The danger zone is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's a sign that you're on the right path because easy paths don't have danger zones. They don't ask you to push through anything. Meaningful paths, paths that change your life and the lives of others, those have danger zones. And if you're in one right now, it means that what you're doing matters. The fourth big lesson that I learned last year is something that nobody tells you about healing work. And that's that you're going to feel bad a lot. And not in the way you think, not like you're doing something wrong, but feeling like you're finally feeling all of the things that you've been trying to avoid. Because unfortunately, healing isn't about feeling good all the time, it's about finally feeling. And don't get discouraged. I want you to hear me out here, okay? I want to talk about this trap of spiritual bypassing because it's been in a lot of my episodes that I've touched on it. But there's this narrative in spiritual spaces, and it basically goes when you're enlightened enough and when you're healed enough and spiritual enough, you're going to be happy all the time. And if you're not, well, you're not doing it right. So when you meditate harder and do more affirmations and try and think your way into positivity to combat this, you're not really facilitating your healing. You're actually preventing it because when you're resisting what's actually true for yourself, that doesn't make it go away. It just pushes those feelings below the surface where then they fester. So, what I've learned this year, especially during the hard months when I was feeling totally drained, is the real work isn't about transcending difficult emotions, it's about allowing them. You're going to feel frustrated and exhausted and angry sometimes. And you're going to be sad about the things that you've lost and afraid of stuff. And that's all just part of the human experience. And your healing happens when you stop fighting those feelings and allow them to be there. And I don't mean wallow in them. I don't mean making them your identity and definitely not using them as an excuse to hurt people, but just acknowledging them, saying, I feel this and it's okay to feel this. This is part of being human. Because what creates real suffering is not the feelings themselves, but the resistance to those feelings. And I don't mean suffering in the Buddhist sense of dukkha, where they talk about the fundamental unsatisfactoriness or unease of existence. When I say suffering, I mean a prolonged endurance of anguish and torment. I don't believe that anger is suffering, but resisting your anger and pretending that you're not angry, that causes suffering. And fear isn't suffering, but beating yourself up for being afraid and thinking that you should be braver than you are, that creates suffering. The feeling itself is just information. It's your system telling you that something matters or something needs attention. But when you resist that feeling, when you tell yourself that you shouldn't feel it, or when you try to transcend it or think your way out of it, that's when it gets trapped in your body. And trapped emotions create all kinds of problems like pain and illness and numbness and disconnection. So, what does it look like to actually accept those difficult feelings? Well, it's not a resignation. It's not giving up and saying, I guess I'm just going to be miserable forever. I did that for a few months after my dad died, and I got myself into some really terrible situations that I am still paying for today. So, 0 out of 10, do not recommend that. It's more like, I feel very angry right now. That's information. My boundaries were crossed, or my values were violated, or something mattered to me and it didn't get honored. That anger is valid. Or maybe it's, I feel scared right now, and that's okay. Doing something that matters always involves some fear. And I don't need to eliminate the fear to move forward. I just need to move forward with the fear. I think that what most of us actually need is just permission to feel bad sometimes. Permission to have a hard day and not try to spiritually bypass it with affirmations, or permission to grieve what you've lost, even if you are still grateful for what you have. We just need permission to be human. Because when you give yourself that permission, something changes. That feeling stops having power over you because you're no longer fighting it. You start making space for it. You acknowledge it. You let it move through you instead of getting stuck. And of course, my 2 cents about how we got to this point. I believe in capitalist societies, bosses really need workers to function at maximum capacity at all times. And if you are feeling your feelings and accepting that you have bad days, that means less productivity for them. And of course, they can't have that. So I do believe that part of why our society here in the United States is so obsessed with being good little robots who don't have pesky things like feelings is so that the machine can continue to function at maximum output, because there's no profit to be made in emotional and spiritual connection. So we're encouraged to eliminate it. And whether you agree with that or disagree, that's totally fine. But there is no denying the part where we are encouraged to suck it up and quit crying and get over it. So here's the thing about accepting difficult feelings. Once you stop resisting them, they move faster. And it seems counterintuitive because you think that fighting off an emotion would make it go away, but it doesn't. It actually keeps it alive and activated. But when you practice acceptance, that acceptance lets it flow. It lets the emotion teach you what it needs to teach you so that it can dissolve. And the path to feeling better isn't, unfortunately, to feel better. It's to stop trying to feel better and just feel what you actually feel. I was doing some work with my therapist, and she instructed me to check in with the part of myself that felt resentful and angry that I was going to this job that I didn't want. And as soon as I actually tried to check in with it, it got so much quieter. Just acknowledging its existence and not fighting it made it better. So the point is, your healing journey isn't going to look like constant love and light. It's going to look like feeling frustrated and then allowing it, understanding what it's telling you, making some adjustments, and moving forward. Then hitting another hard thing, feeling another difficult emotion, and doing it all over again. That is the work. That is what actually transforms you. And that leads us into lesson number 5, which is healing is less about fixing yourself and more about becoming yourself. So there was this point in my life where I was looking in the mirror and I really did not like what I was looking back at. I was constantly feeling angry and frustrated, like I was never going to get what I wanted out of life and that was everybody else's fault. And I was suffering. My relationships were suffering, and I knew I really needed to change. So I went back through all my old self-help and personal development materials that had helped me so much in the past, but this time they just weren't landing the same. They didn't feel like the right advice. I felt like I was forcing myself to do something that looked better on the outside, but really felt out of alignment with who I wanted to become. So I found another way. I decided to lean into my spirituality and reconnect with the old things that I grew up with that led me to feel connected to the universe, like tarot and magic and grounding and feeling my feelings. I also got myself some support from somebody who really aligns with my beliefs and my healing modalities, and even introduced me to some new ones I hadn't tried before. And what I found was amazing. Instead of trying to eliminate the parts of myself that I didn't like, I started showing up for myself with compassion, and I learned understanding, and I released my judgment. I stopped judging myself for how I was feeling, and I stopped judging myself for wanting those feelings to change. I stopped trying to move away from who I was, and I started leaning into who I wanted to become. And the more I poured my energy into becoming more myself instead of running away from the parts of me I didn't like, the more I started to bloom. When you embark on a healing journey, it's not usually because you're happy with yourself. And it's usually not because you're happy with your life. It's usually because you are in so much emotional pain that you need a change, that you can't keep going the way you are, that something is wrong in your life and it needs to be fixed. But what if the things that needed fixing were messengers and they were guides leading you toward the life that you were meant to live? When you come up to a situation that feels overwhelming, maybe that's your cue to step back and look at it with a fresh perspective. Ask yourself, what are you feeling? What changes can you make? Is this leading you away from something or towards something else? Is it possible that the universe is sending you a message that you need to get back into alignment with your true path? When I started leaning into my truest self, I realized that the things that I thought needed fixing actually didn't need fixing. I did not need to be less angry or less irritated. What I needed was to listen, to honor the part of me that felt wronged and stand up for the things that I wanted. That's when the anger subsided, when I listened and when I leaned in, not when I was trying to constantly let it go. So, when you start thinking of your future and you visualize the life that you want and the feelings that you want to feel and the experiences you want to have, ask yourself, how would that person show up? How would they handle this tough situation? How would they handle overwhelming emotions? And how can I start to move toward that? You don't need to escape the person you are now to become the person you want to become. The person you are now is giving your future self a massive gift. She's building the foundation for the future you. She is learning all the hard lessons and doing all the tedious groundwork that's going to make your future self have the blissful, peaceful life that she desires. And you can feel gratitude towards your past and your present self for making the sacrifices that are needed and going through all of that pain that's required to build a resilient, strong, loving woman that you are becoming. And believe me, I have definitely felt the feelings of, you know what, I don't want to be resilient. How about that? But since we're here, Since we're currently going through these struggles anyway, at least we can look to our future and start to move toward it and know that your future self is going to feel so much love and compassion for you and everything that you're going through right now. Now, there are people listening to this podcast who are doing incredibly deep inner healing work and nobody knows about it because they're doing the work, but they're not posting on social media about it. They're just showing up for themselves silently. And I want those people to know that takes courage. That takes more courage than publicly sharing can, because when you decide to heal and to grow and change and you do it without any external validation, that's real. That's grounded. That's true transformation. And that's also exactly why I'm making this podcast. Because, yeah, comments and likes are great, but I know that showing up is what's important. That I keep putting content out that's going to help you heal from your trauma and balance your energy and get back to a place where life feels good again. This year, I've not only helped countless women heal, but I've also healed a lot in myself. I've been working in the shadows a bit myself on the things that I don't necessarily want to share publicly yet. But you know what? That's okay. That doesn't make my work any less impactful. And that's why number 6 is healing doesn't require an audience. So maybe you're listening to this in your car on the way to work or while you're doing dishes, but every single time that you tune in, something happens. Your nervous system shifts a little bit. You're being regulated by the presence of somebody who understands what you're going through. Your perspective expands. Your soul recognizes itself in the words being spoken. And in that moment of recognition, you're not alone anymore. Maybe you listen and you think about an episode for a couple of days afterwards, or something lands deeply, and that shifts how you see a relationship or a pattern or a part of yourself. Maybe you take a practice from one of the episodes and you actually do it. The journaling, the breath work, and something releases in you that's been stuck for years. That's what counts. When you listen to this podcast, when you do the healing work without announcing it, when you show up for yourself in silence, you're actually building something really solid. You're building a relationship with yourself that doesn't depend on external validation. You're learning to trust your own inner knowing. You're proving to yourself that you can commit to your growth even when nobody else is watching. And when you tune in, you're part of something. You are part of a community of women who are committed to their own healing, who are brave enough to do the deep work, even in silence. And every time you listen, you're joining a collective intention towards growth, toward healing, toward returning to your inner divine. And that's community. Sometimes it's just you and me in the moment, connected through attention and intention. If you're listening right now and you're not ready to be public about your work, that's fine. That's exactly where you need to be. Keep doing the work in private. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep letting this podcast be a mirror, a guide, a witness to your transformation. One day you might be ready to step into visibility. And when you do, it won't be from a place of seeking approval. It'll be from a place of wholeness. Until then, keep showing up. Keep listening. Keep choosing yourself. I will too, and we can grow together. Speaking of together, that brings us to lesson number 7, and that is all about the power of asking for help. We see this in every recovery program. There is no recovery program that's about isolation. They are all filled with therapy and group sessions and meetings because the power that's created when you join with another person and have a common goal is far greater than just 1 + 1 = 2. It's exponential. It goes back to that compounding principle. So when we're in a phase of life that hasn't necessarily been our favorite, and we're desperately looking for a transformation, this is when we need to apply this principle. We need to turn to the power of community, whether that's joining a support group or a trauma recovery program, or just enlisting the help of a trusted friend or therapist. There is no benefit in trying to make this journey alone. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, when I reached out for help, that is when my healing quantum leaped. I went from a really slow 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of approach to massive forward movement with real, lasting, positive change. And that's what I want for you too. In my previous episodes, I've put out that I offer a free one-on-one call to help you establish what the best direction is for you to move forward with your healing goals. But now I have a question for you. And this is mostly out of curiosity. And I really, really want to know, would you rather embark on your own healing journey with a trusted professional guiding you, giving you personalized one-on-one attention? Or do you feel like a group setting where you can hear other people's stories and learn from their lessons, as well as get your own attention and have this group to turn to for support? Which of those approaches feels most supportive to you? Because I personally have been in both private and group coaching programs, and I feel that they both have a lot of benefits. But I'm just curious, you, my listener, which direction are you most likely to choose? And have you tried that approach before? And if you have, what did you love about it? What did you hate about it? I know I'm asking a lot, but I'm just very curious about this. You can shoot me an email at mariah@mariahaurora.com, or you can leave a comment on this episode if you're listening on Spotify. And if you're on Apple, you can just leave it in the reviews. I would really love to get your perspective on this. But for now, I have a free Facebook group called Jotindi. There is a link in the show notes, and you can search it up, or you can, find it on your own. But I would love for you to join that if you're interested in joining a community at all. And as we approach the end of this episode, I really just want to say, wow. I mean, 1 year, 52 episodes, and one beautiful community of women who are all committed to their own healing. This is something to celebrate, and not because we've made it, and not because everything is perfect or successful by mainstream standards, but because we showed up. We did the work. We honored our commitment. And that's everything. So to everybody who's been here since day one, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this journey with me. Your presence has mattered so much more than you know. And to everybody who's just starting, welcome. You are joining a community that knows something sacred, that showing up is the work, that invisible progress is still progress, and that your presence matters. And I have to be honest with you. When I started this podcast, I only committed to 1 year. I said, I'm going to do this for 1 year and see how it goes. At the end of that year, I'll reassess and see if it's worth continuing. But you know what I've learned? It's not really about whether the podcast is worth continuing. It's about if you are worth supporting. And the answer to that is a big, resounding yes. So as I move forward with my next 52 episodes, I'm going to do it with a renewed sense of commitment, not to reach more people necessarily, but to serve the people who are here most deeply, not to chase visibility, but to tend to what's growing invisibly. And I'm inviting you to do the same in your own life. Identify one commitment that you've been considering but haven't quite made yet. Maybe it's that daily practice. Maybe it's showing up for yourself in a way that you haven't before. Maybe it's pursuing something that feels invisible and scary. And then commit, not for the results or the external proof, but because it matters to you. Because showing up for yourself, even when nobody is watching, is the most sacred work that you can do. So if you need an affirmation for today, try this one. I show up for what matters because I am building something sacred. Thank you so much for 1 year. Here's to year 2 and all the invisible growth that's preparing to become visible. And don't forget, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path.